All right, so I am pleased to moderate the next panel on ethical dilemmas in climate robotics, and I'd like to invite my fellow panelists to join us here on stage. Hey, Brooke.
Yeah.
As I frame the topic a little bit. Now, why have a panel on ethical dilemmas in climate robotics? Well, because robots are increasingly occupying our social spaces, both our public spaces and our private spaces, as well as both our urban spaces and our rural spaces, including, of course, natural ecosystems. Now, what are the implications of this? What kinds of tensions arise from this increasing proximity and interaction with robots with respect to social technical systems and vulnerable ecosystems, ecological ecosystems? How do we best manage these tensions and ideally proactively manage? And what are the resulting implications of all this? Even the effort of trying to manage, does that have knock-on effects? And ultimately, then, how do we ensure that we do no harm? And I think you'll agree that doing no harm is an important question, and one of several important questions that we're going to tackle today. And that's why we have this panel on ethical dilemmas. And I see our colleagues getting ready, so we're just waiting for Nejra, I think. Um, Hopefully we'll see her soon. Now, just in terms of format, so each panelist will take just a few minutes to introduce themselves, after which we'll have a bit of a fireside chat, and I'll offer an initial round of questions, and then we'll invite fellow participants to share their questions for our speakers. And then we'll close by asking each of our panelists for their hot take. It's something we like to do here at the Climate Robotics Summit. And by that, just to explain, a hot take is a controversial opinion, something that's provocative, that is an opinion that is hardly shared by others within your community, within your own spheres. Alrighty, so just a check. Do we have Nejra with us yet? No. Okay. So we'll start. We were going to start with Nejra. We'll come back to her once she's joined. Brooke, you're up then. And thank you very much for joining. And thank you for Tailwind for being a supporting partner of this year's Climate Robotics Summit. My question to you comes from a panel that I listened in on at an event focused on investing in robotics. Oh, wait, no, I don't do questions. Sorry.
No.
Intro. I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to get to the answers, and yet, wheeling
Totally.
back, grind. Please, let's start with you. Brief introduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. No problem at all. I know I want to get to the questions too. But hi, everyone. I am a senior associate at Tailwind. We are a climate adaptation and resilience investment fund, an ecosystem builder. And what that means is just we fund early stage adaptation and resilience technologies, which includes robotics, as well as, convene folks to help drive funding and support to these early stage adaptation resilience solutions. Prior to Tailwind, I was working as project manager for a few climate tech startups, primarily in the mitigation space, and with Urban Future Lab, which is New York City's longest running climate tech incubator. But my professional foundation, and part of the reason why I'm so excited for this conversation, is because my prior foundation was in environmental advocacy and justice at an environmental law firm called Earth Justice. So excited to be here.
Super. Thanks again for joining. Over to Bikash and then Rob.
Thanks, Patrick, for giving us the opportunity to join to Climate Robotics Network. Hi, everyone. This is Engineer Vikas. I'm the president of Robotics Association of Nepal. I'm also now chairman of SKIP Nepal, which is a strategy consortium of intelligence professional, which has a member in 150 countries, 1,500 professionals. Executive director of Mission Oxygen team to save lives, and then chairman of Probity Group. Talking about Robotics Association of Nepal, it's a not-for-profit initiative, non-governmental organization working for the promotion and development of robotics, AI, and automation. Since 2010 here in the country, we have lots of initiative that supports robotics and automation implementation here in the country, such as Yantra, Science Tech and Entrepreneurship Festival. We are organizing 10th version of it with the theme Society 5.0 and Intelligence System. I think that connects to today's discussion theme as well. And then we have initiative like Miss Tech, empowering women through women. So lots of initiative under Miss Tech. And then we have National Innovation Digital Network. We connect innovators from all around the country here, and we try to empower them through industry support, networking, mentorship. We have lots of other partnership with like a World Robot Cooperation Organization, International Alliance of Robotics Association. We partner with NAS, Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, ministries, communication, information technology, education, science and technology, health and population. So I think the discussion today will be all based on the experience that we have from the global to the local. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Bikesh. Rob, over to you.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Rob Krueger. I'm a human geographer and professor of human geography at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, USA. I've been studying issues around sustainable, especially equitable, sustainable development for some time now. And my work has sort of meandered around the world, just in a snowball type of format. There's been no rhyme or reason. There's opportunities that presented themselves. They were interesting, and I've explored them. So, from right here in my own backyard, working on environmental justice and climate justice issues, to the UK, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And Africa is where I'm spending my time right now. And through the course of that experience, I got to see firsthand how climate impacts people that tend to be outside of the view of the global north, what Patrick calls the global majority, and had a chance firsthand to talk to many people about how they're affected by it, and how Western NGOs framed their impact of it, and how that was really inappropriate. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I'll leave it at that. And I thank you, Patrick.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, now we get to the questions finally. Yay. But seriously, really appreciate it. And it's just great to have all of you come from such different disciplines, and of course, still with multiple shared interests. That is the beauty of the Climate Robotics Summit and Network. So Brooke, back to you. Again, thank you to Tailwind for being a supporting partner. And the question I had for you was from a panel that I mentioned that I had listened in on. It was an event on investing in robotics, and a major investor who was on this panel, who's based in the US, was asked by an audience member whether, as far as their climate robotics investments go, whether they're prioritizing investments in climate mitigation, climate adaptation, or both, and why. And the speed, it was very, very, the person didn't even blink an eye. It was an immediate answer, was, quote, 100% mitigation because there's still time, end quote. What are your thoughts on this balanced tension between mitigation and adaptation? What might that potentially mean, and you think, for robotics?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, because even among folks who are interested or even working in the adaptation and resilience space, there's still a sense of, oh, but is working on adaptation basically like giving up, essentially? Because people are thinking, okay, we should fund mitigation or decarbonization solutions to minimize eventually the growing, more severe, more frequent climate change impacts, such as severe convective storms, flooding, extreme heat, etc. But the reality is those impacts are already happening. And with 2024 being the first year that the global average temperatures reached 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial temperatures, that is a reality that we have to face. And regarding adaptation and resilience as a investment theme, I also want to challenge folks to reframe it as, instead of a tension between mitigation and adaptation, it is essentially two sides of the same coin of climate change. Both are critical to address climate change as an issue, but the reality is, especially for the most vulnerable communities who do not have access to resources and solutions that aren't scaled or accessible enough to reach those communities, we need to drive more funding to adaptation and resilience solutions and not just to mitigation. So Tailwind actually released this report last year called Our Playbook on Adaptation, Resilience, Innovation. You can check it out. And also I can send links in the chat, but for some reason, I don't seem to be able to send it to everyone. So Patrick, perhaps I can send them to you later, or let me know if there's a way to, but we can get to that later. Essentially, I can share that document, but this playbook compiled research that found, in partnership with an AI and data company called Vibrant Data Labs, that only 3% of climate tech funding goes to adaptation and resilience companies. That is not okay, considering the realities that we're already facing with, say, the extreme heat events and the flooding that Europe's already faced, and obviously the wildfires in the US, the hurricanes. And so I want to say that adaptation and resilience is the opposite of giving up. And what we're doing is not stopping funding from going to mitigation, but instead facing the realities that are happening now and figuring out how we can best not just survive, but ideally thrive, considering the real physical impacts that are already happening to the most exposed communities. And I also want to note that if you are an investor or a founder, or maybe you're a corporate wanting to invest more and look into adaptation resilience technologies to either protect your own business or your own communities, it is really important to keep in mind the potential maladaptation risks that can come with implementing these solutions in the first place. So what that means are, for instance, if you are embedding a solution to prevent flooding in coastal communities, there have already been, been incidences of the incumbent infrastructure solutions, such as seawalls, which are not the most effective oftentimes, accidentally causing circular water flows and flooding in lower income communities next to the higher income communities that they were originally intended to protect. And so thinking about, as you're developing and scaling these solutions, making sure you work with local partners and you deeply understand what the potential first, second, third degree repercussions are to ensure that your solution actually works.
Thank you very, very much, Brooke. Very well said. And feel free to post links in if it's for hosts and panelists, we'll have our team broadcast it to the
Thanks.
full chat. Thank you. It kind of reminded me of, and welcome, Nejra. Thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Reminds me, we had our keynote speaker last year. One of our keynote speakers last year was Catherine Hayhoe, and I've seen her increasingly also online taking a approach that I thought was, for me, good, to also say, listen, yeah, adaptation is important, but we cannot just adapt our way out of this either. Because I'm really in the adaptation corner. I feel extremely strongly for many of the reasons that you've shared, and so it was interesting for me to see another take from somebody else who I also respect. Say, okay, yes, but let's not, there's no silver bullet. It's both and. It's everything. We've got to do it all, basically. But okay, great, super. Thank you. We'll go maybe to Bikash, Rob, and then to Nejra. Okay. So on Bikash. So first of all, Bikash, thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining the summit once again this year. Thank you also for serving on the advisory board of the Climate Robotics Network. It's been phenomenal to have you and your team, including Rishabh as well, who's here, working with the coordination team. Now you and I, but you were actively involved, and many of our colleagues here who are actually online now at the summit were actively involved earlier this year in the UK government's project on the use of robotics to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically in low and middle income countries. And I was wondering whether, of course, from your perspective, what some of the most important tensions or dilemmas or anything that might have just, given you concern that might have come up for you during that 4-month project.
I think, the strategic foresight project that we worked on, it was really an amazing product that we worked on in terms of understanding what the future might look like and how robotics and AI will shape the world. And I think one of the key insights that we found was when we are thinking about the future, it's not about what the people with the money, the people who has the power, access to the technology, or people who has knowledge on the latest of the tools and technology should only be using or getting empowered with those kinds of tools. But it's also about understanding how it affects the people on the ground, the people who are here in countries like Nepal, let's say like Afghanistan, or countries in Africa. So the strategic foresight definitely took out that the challenges that might come with the implementation of robotics and AI is definitely we want to make this world efficient world. But how about those who would lose the job? When we will be able to, when we will bring these kinds of tools and technologies. B- for in Nepal, like there are forest rangers who are looking after the forest, but now drones are being used to monitor the ecosystem. Are we also thinking about these forest rangers who are already taking care of the national parks and helping the protected area get secured? Or are we also thinking of making them enable with these kinds of technology? Are we also letting them understand, hey, there can be a robot dog that you can use, and then it you can use it to monitor the area where you are supposed to have your duty. So I think we rightfully found out that there has to be a balance between the jobs that might lose because of the implementation of the technology, and also the new jobs that we might create, but with the focus of these people who might not be, totally empowered with the latest tools and technology because they don't have access. We might, people who are on the top might know that okay, these technologies are coming into the picture, but they may not know that okay, these technology are not rocket science. These are something you can use it with your hands, with your mobile apps or remote controls, or you can just be with them and then use it for the solutions that already exist. The foresight definitely had, everything on frame. And one of the key aspect is always like when we talk about different global funds, either that can be from FCDO or maybe from different foundations that might come. It's always important to think about not only in terms of bringing the capitals from these kinds of investment. It's also about solving the problem that exists in the ground. Wildfires, that's becoming a massive problem for even in US, or even for in Nepal. We had a large fires. So are we thinking about these funds that can be capitalized or used to develop these solutions and then implement them to prevent, or let's say to be on the action when the calamities are happening, or to be able to respond when the things go out of their hand? And I think that's what we derive, that okay, we, if we are thinking about the future, we need to already plan that the solutions or the technological intervention that we are thinking from these kinds of fund or the projects that we will develop has to consider them into the front, what might go wrong, right? So we need to think about that, and then we would need to come from 5 years or 10 years back to the present, and then take the direction ahead. I think one of the important work that we did from the that foresight is always bring communities in the focus. And one of the moment that's gaining in countries like in the global south is bringing the local ground communities also on the frame, thinking about the technology that always consider the community. And I think the FCDU's foresight workshop that we did together had the community always on the priority. And the ethical dilemma that might come into the future, I think we considered it well. And I think that could be a lesson learning for or other foresights that would be done in, let's say, like USA does it or other foundation does it.
Right. Thank you. This is super. Thank you very much for that rich insight, those rich insights. And you speak with so much authority and credibility, having been leading this the Robotics Association of Nepal for so many years, and I've seen just how incredibly committed you are, and you're walking the talk on the values and this local power of local approach. Thank you, Bikash. Rob, thank you too, and WPI for being such a phenomenal partner and enabler of the Climate Robotics Network and the summit. The question I shared with you, and feel free to expand, go in different directions, of course. As Brooke mentioned, right, many of the countries that will be the hardest hit by climate change are in what some call the majority world. I'm a fan of that term, the global majority, meaning the global south, the so-called global south. It is, so we have that reality. It's also true that 95% of, at least 95% of climate robotics startups, and we have the data, are based in the global north. And so if this extremely skewed trend were to persist, what implications might that have? And how might we best change that particular trend?
It's a great question, and I expect a great question coming from you. So thanks, Patrick. Yeah, so I have a number of thoughts on this. I guess I could say, I mean, when I meet people like Bikash, I'm can be more cautiously optimistic than I was when I was hopped on the call. But I see three significant issues related to this. I'm just going to mention them, and I'll kind of dig into each one in due course. There's this thing called, this concept or phrase, humanitarian extractivism, where a lot of times, it's really about the data and not about helping people. It's about, collecting information that promotes another business plan. I think that also, and again, Bikash pointed this out, is that the motivation needs to begin from the needs of local people, not from the needs of how you tweak or bring to bear your technology or your kit onto local communities. And finally, what I haven't heard mentioned, and I think is also important, is that we really need to develop local capacity. We need to make robotics seem as natural and as normal as I don't know, digging a latrine or harvesting your food and things like that. And there's ways that we can do that, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And so really what I want to think about ultimately is how do we, and I mean this in a critical but yet somewhat optimistic way, is we need to take Western STEM and transform it into something that's a truly global STEM. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity, as sad as I am that many of my colleagues were fired unceremoniously by the US president at USAID. I think there's also an opportunity in this. So let me go back to extractive industries. I got involved or interested and was talking to somebody else who's in this room, Bert Challey, my colleague at WPI, when I was heard about a company called Zipline. And Zipline is this company out of Silicon Valley that flies drones to fly anti-venom blood and serum to remote parts of the world. Most specifically, I was doing some work in Ghana at the time, and I noticed it. And the Ghanaian government spent $34 million to do this. And then we started poking around in the regions that they were flying to. And what they needed more than they needed the blood was the capacity for somebody to do venopuncture so they could do a transfusion. Because even when the blood arrives, and a woman is, having a difficult pregnancy and bleeding out or something, if you can't transfuse the blood, it makes no sense. And so it's that $30 million that was spent on this contract. I mean, if you think you take some percentage of that and put it into healthcare training and that sort of thing, it's important to think about. And then also, we have to wonder what's important to a firm like Zipline. I mean, as they're flying their drones across airspace in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, they're collecting data as they go. And is that really what their business model is all about or not? I don't know. I asked the same question of Elon Musk and all of his failed rocket attempts. It's like he's really just collecting data for some future rocket folks. Developing local capacity. Let me go with, I'm going to jump ahead to that and then jump back to local motivation. We're doing, so WPI was part of a group that developed an inexpensive robot that they launched, I don't know, 18 months ago now, called the XRP. Dean Kamen was involved in it. And we've taken it to Namibia, specifically WPI. It's around the world, but we've taken it to Namibia and to Paraguay. And are teaching students in agricultural vocational schools basic robotics. But not only doing that, linking it to how robotics can meet their everyday needs, how it's not about necessarily the coding or the wiring of the robot or something like that. It's those translational skills that you can move across that. And once you can start doing that, you can see new potential that probably the folks in this room don't see at this moment, right? And so really trying to sort of embed that into, I admit I was a little skeptical of this. I'm a human geographer. I was a little skeptical of this at first, but then I saw the impact of it, and it's outstanding. It truly is a game changer. And they moved on from these basic robots to now they're training drone pilots so they can look at forest fires, and we have some other technology to look at soil composition to help large scale and even small scale farmers to identify how to best use their water for irrigation. So when you do that, now I want to go back to my second point, which is now my third point. So when you do that, you can truly make, you can motivate from the local level, right? Because people have this, there's sort of, there's always, not we, but in this room, but oftentimes we see the global majority as a place fraught with problems, but really it's a place that has many assets, and assets that we're unable to recognize. And by helping train folks in ways that they can take ownership of this, and Ron Eglash, a professor at the School of Information at the University of Michigan, calls it generative justice, where it's non-alienated connectivity to what you're doing. So it's like, it's one thing to sort of have a phone or a robot that is an exercise, but being able to do, again, harness those translational skills across to other types of things. So that will help in ways that we probably don't yet understand, empower local communities to really be participants. And they already are participants, they already are collaborators, but maybe increase that impact. So I'll stop there and thank you for everybody for your
Thanks
time.
so much, Rob. Absolutely, deeply resonates. Thanks for those insights. Brilliant. Hi, Nejra, welcome. Maybe what we'll do is I'll share my question, and then maybe you can take the opportunity to also introduce yourself as well, so folks understand the context, the framing of where you're coming from. I think you're the first expert in psychology to join the summit, so I'm very excited by that in terms of walking the talk around multidisciplinary. Now we know that based on an earlier conversation that you and I had, that robots are often designed to reduce friction, if not completely eliminate friction. But is there a downside to even lowering that friction? Can friction play a helpful role? And one example might be, if we look at waste management, we had a whole session on robotics and waste management a day or two ago. Why bother humans to sort out our trash in this, 17 different bins. I'm being provocative on purpose. When all that garbage can just be thrown in 1 or 2 bins and then sorted later using robotics at the point of wherever it goes, right? Why bother with this kind of best practice in terms of human behavior? Over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Sorry for being late. Technical issues. So my name's Nejra van Zalk. I'm an associate professor at the Dyson School of Design Engineering in Psychology and Human Factors. Basically, I'm an associate professor in psychology, but I happen to be in an engineering department, and engineers call us the human factors, which I find distinctly funny. My work is very much focusing on trying to understand how we can design products and services and interventions that are beneficial for mental health primarily. And I look at human technology interaction as a very important part of that. And of course, an increased focus in my research interest is, areas of drones and robots and cobotics, of course, being the next kind of frontier, and how this is going to impact on humans and our ability to think of ourselves as useful, and what we're going to be doing with our lives and our mental health and well-being and all of that. So I guess that's why Patrick invited me to come and talk about it. So where you talked about friction, Patrick, it's such an interesting concept, and this is very much used in user experience design, where designers talk about adding features to any kind of design that can make it more difficult for users to accomplish goals or get things done, and that there might be a reason why we want to do that, right? So it could be things like on your computer, it's like it could be a newsletter sign up overlay that covers the actual content, and you can't really see what's happening, right? In gaming design, this is used very effectively, because in gaming design, we want to introduce friction as much as possible, because we want people to kind of be involved, in the design, in the game itself, and not to want to stop playing. So you raised this interesting thing about, how should we think about design friction when it comes to robots, and should we be lowering friction, and if it can play a helpful role? And I'm absolutely, it's probably a very unpopular view, because I'm not on the side of humans who think we should be making our lives as easy as possible. I'm sure you guys have seen WALL-E. If you haven't seen WALL-E, I recommend it as a deep study of a dystopia that may happen once we start relying way too much on robots. And I understand that we're in the realm of climate robotics, and of course, there's a huge usefulness to that. But even in that realm, where we can say, these robots are going to be designed to do things that humans shouldn't be doing because it's going to be potentially dangerous, even there, I think we always have to think of humans first, in the sense of human needs and human autonomy. There's a very interesting, I won't go too deeply into it, but I just thought I'd throw it out there for people. Very interesting theory by Richard Devine and Edward Deci called self-determination theory, which is very famous. It's been used loads in gaming design. And it focuses on what makes people thrive, and it's basically hitting 3 fundamental needs, which is the need for competence. So we have to be better. We have to keep getting better and developing new skills all the time. The need for interconnectedness, which is about, we like to be connected to one another. And one of the most important ones is the need for autonomy, the need to feel that we have control over what's happening to us. And when those 3 needs are not fulfilled, people start to develop all manner of alternative things that they start doing as strategies to fulfill those needs. And if they can't, they start to develop loads of problems related to issues with mental health. So things like anxiety and depressive symptoms, for example, are a great example of when people feel like they have lost control over what's happening, they can develop this learned helplessness where there's just nothing you can do. So you just start to feel like it doesn't really matter. And so where I'm, and this might sound very, a little bit like woohoo to lots of people sitting out there who are maybe, thinking about more interested in electronics or, thinking about drone design. But I'm a firm believer that at the end of the day, these systems should be viewed as part of kind of socio-technical systems, where we're going to be in a future that, in a positively envisioned future, we would not be depending on these things, and we would not be feeling disillusioned and like we're lacking control. Instead, we would feel like we have the control over what they're doing. We are, we're involved in how these systems are used, how they're designed. And in fact, participatory design practices have already been raised heavily in this session, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Knowing what the context is, who you're designing for, and who those people are. That's one crucial key aspect to giving people feeling of control over what's happening and how they're using these systems. So of course there are reasons to introduce 17 different bins. I'm from Sweden, by the way. I think we have like 17 different bins where we sort our rubbish. But there are reasons that we might want to be doing that. Sometimes we want people to take the hard way because we may believe that there is inherent value in them doing that. We don't want to deprive them of certain skills. We don't want to deprive them of certain work, right? We don't want to take away aspects of what it is to be human. Instead, we want to empower them. It's that control aspect which is really important. So I'm a big believer in friction, and I think it's not talked about enough. Where there's so many issues with designing these systems safely at the moment that's where all the focus is. It's on kind of like physical safety. Whereas I'm also propagating for designing systems for mental health safety. So I'm going to probably leave it there.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Amazing. Great insights. Beautiful. Okay. Do we have any questions for our panelists? I don't want to monopolize the stage here. Brooke, so Professor Brooke Colley from WPI, how can we design discouragement mechanisms that would make a human-focused approach more common? I'm gonna think it's you, Nejra. Nejra, do you take it or?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to hear from everyone else, but this is such an excellent question, by the way, because we talk about this a lot. First of all, may I use the dreaded word regulation? Okay. Right now, it's every digital innovation, and for example, because that is my sphere, largely speaking, it's largely unregulated. And so what people are mainly concerned about when it comes to innovating is, how can we get people to click ads faster and for longer, right? But no one's really thinking about what's the consequences on people once they've been sitting and doing this for 8 hours in a row, especially if they're vulnerable, if they're children, or if they have other problems, blah, blah, blah. So, there's also all these discussions when it comes to digital technologies. And I think I haven't really seen much when it comes to kind of, future the future of robotics, climate robotics, cobotics, where, what should we be regulating? Where should regulators step in and say, hey, if you're going to design a system, you really need to these are the things that need to be retained for humans whilst you're designing kind of around that. I haven't even seen kind of discussions about that. I guess this is exactly what these kinds of forums are for, right? And Patrick, I'm sure you know a lot more about these discussions than I do, but yeah, my answer would be, regulation, but also education. I think a lot of people are not necessarily trained in considering humans in the loop. Participatory design practices come as a huge surprise for many, even though they're designing systems and products that are going to effectively be used by a human in the end. So yeah, that's my take on it. I'd love to hear from the others.
Thank you. Who wants to jump in on these topics? Feel free to unmute and just talk directly.
I think one of the key area where we need to focus in terms of all these kinds of development of the technology is how we think of empowering the people with this kind of technology, and how people feel satisfied with the uses that they might get. because until and unless people feel empowered from this technology, they will not find this technology for themselves, and that's where the reluctance comes. That's where the resistance also comes. And but the technology definitely always has two sides of the coin. And for now, like how technology has changed the social fabric, it's really important. And we are also seeing the downsides, but the empowerment side, if we try to build upon it and also reduce the sides that makes people discourage, I think we can get the balance. And definitely regulation is definitely important, but it's also area, gray, there is a gray area that what is coming up, we don't know. The way the technology has evolved, we are not sure about all the consequences. But definitely now, like, we are experiencing all these consequences, we need to rethink. Okay, this is the output of what we have innovated or what we have invented. Now we need to think about what is useful for the human and what is not. And I think there are so many things that are important for the human. When we think of the climate robotics, we cannot the human would not be able to save lives in Mount Everest. They don't have the capacity. Drones can do that. Robots that has the survival the capacity to go in the high hilly areas, that can save lives. So the limited capacity of human and the unlimited capacity of this new technology, so there is a differentiation of what these technologies brings on the table. And I think we need to capitalize on the things that technologies are bringing on the table.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Vikash. Well, very well put. We have just a few minutes left, and I do want to get a hot take round. I might just move to, we have another question, so we'll take that as the last. Oh, no, there's two. I'll start with the first one that came in first. This is from Andrew Schroeder from Direct Relief. How confident are we, given projections of rapid technological change, that human, quote, human, will actually be well understood as a grounding category for technological ethics, as opposed to some kind of cybernetic hybrid approach, like, say, Donna Haraway has encouraged for many years? I have well, who wants to answer that? This seems a bit like inside baseball that you might not be a bit more familiar with, Nejra. No, we can skip it.
I mean, yeah, no, I don't know. So I don't know how is that framework related to the idea of cobotics, right? So using sort of coexisting with the robotic systems. I don't know how well aligned that is. I mean, yeah, it's all speculative at this stage, isn't it? Much like what Vikash said, there's so much speculation. And I think I'd love to see the discussion about where we want AI to go as well, to align with where we want robotic systems to go, right? So is there a global consensus on what we think is inherently human characteristics that are worth preserving? And what are the ones that we should then cling on to? And then if people want to have antennae, sticking out of them, whatever, I don't know, I'm not one to judge, but I think that there are kind of probably more, in my view, maybe more pressing issues about these systems being deployed in a way that's taking away value for humans.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we're going to go into the final round of hot takes, but we do have a question from Timothy. So if any of you are sticking around, feel free to go to the Q&A feature there and chime in. I think the question is to Brooke. Brooke, it's all yours. So in terms of, well, let's go in that same original order. Brooke, any hot takes, contrarian, provocative opinion that you want to share?
Yeah, totally. And Timothy, I'll answer your question after the session. This is not necessarily a hot take, but more of just addressing a misconception, I think, in adaptation and resilience of it mainly being public infrastructure, things like seawalls, which I mentioned earlier is an example of maladaptation when you deploy these solutions in local communities, only because I thought it was most digestible. But the reality is, we need innovations like robotics. These cutting edge things are more effective to, say, protect communities from coastal flooding as the example. And I'm going to also give some more context to the stat I shared earlier of only 3% of all climate tech funding goes to adaptation and resilience solutions. Well, you can broaden that out from our playbook data, which I sent a link to earlier, where yes, 3% of funding goes to pure play adaptation resilience startups, but I think it's 42% of all climate tech funding goes to pure play and dual startups. So what that means are solutions that, say, have co-benefits in both mitigation and adaptation. And as an example of what that looks like, there are robotics for, say, remote inspection of, say, buildings to ensure that the people inside are safe either before or after some kind of natural climate disaster event occurs. There are also robotics for, say, tracking water quality and pipeline inspections. And these things can help people track, say, their both water resource intensity for companies wanting to measure their carbon intensity, while also ensuring water access for the people in the area. And so it's just to say, let's keep in mind that there is a lot of action out there, and that there are really amazing innovations that can have use cases towards adaptation and resilience to protect folks.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Brooke. Thanks a lot. All right, Bikash, one last quick hot take, and then Rob and Nejra.
You want me to answer to the same question?
No, just hot take. Any kind of
Okay.
you don't have to have one either. You could say thank you. Good.
I think, I have always been advocate for this global robotics fund, that can support the robotics for humanity, like definitely the world of robotics is growing and the billion dollars companies are also being built. But I think robotics is something when we think of it's tools that always empowers human, that has the capacity to what the humans is not able to do. So we need to find the funds that that can help us design robotics innovation that can be deployed without where humans cannot be deployed or humans cannot intervene. So I think one of the key focus of these platforms is how we can bring our voice in the global platforms like COP, or let's say like a World Robot Cooperation Organization, bring the Global Robotics Fund that supports the robotics innovation that can help mitigate the climate climate change and different climate actions. And I think, we will find the track, and definitely the dilemmas around should we be a robotics startup for develop robotic solution that can help humanity. So we would come out of that box as well, and then we can promote the robotics innovation.
Good deal. Thanks, Bikash. Rob.
Well, thanks again, everyone, and especially you, Patrick, for organizing, leading the organizing charge. So thank you, and Burke too. So yeah, I got to tell you, I'm still stuck on the Haraway question. I think that's a really provocative question, and I think it's a question that it's really so what, because what humans are has always been, what humanity is has always been different. There are parts of it that have been subjugated and and uh, um, privileged. And what's happening now is no different. I mean, with the social media and other types of things, with AI and how it could evolve, that question doesn't matter. We got to get over it and learn how to talk to each other and negotiate difference. So that's my hot take.
Well, thanks, Rob. Nejra, take it home.
Oh gosh, yeah, no pressure. Thanks everyone. Yeah, and sorry for being late. It's again, it's an unpopular view, but I think that if we're going to be truly aiming for a future where we're working alongside smart automated technology that helps to kind of augment our capabilities while it allows us to focus on these skills that are uniquely human, then we really need to think about what are those skills that are uniquely human, how are they different for different people depending on where they live, and what kind of value should we place on that when we're designing these products. So let's use all the tools in our box, including friction, where sometimes we may have to make things a little bit more difficult because we want to preserve those uniquely human aspects, while the robots do all the drudgery that we don't want to do. And that's my kind of utopian Star Trek view on it. And that's where I'm hoping that we're moving towards.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. Please help me thank digitally our phenomenal panelists here with a round of applause. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for your time. It's been brilliant. And wishing you all a great rest of your week and a bright weekend ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you.